in Seattle, Washington, and we're in the cartoonist capital of the world, and we're also where they filmed Twin Peaks, eating pie and coffee. Jim's got ice cream on his. This is some damn fine cherry pie and coffee.
Exactly. And this is, by the way, comic books and pie.
Comic books and pie. So, Jim, you and I have been drawing comics since we were, I don't know, how old were you when you first drew your comics?
I know
you
way
were
before
doing Batman.
way before I met you, when I was like 9 and 10, I would set up easels in my living room. My mom was a painter, and so I would set up an easel and try to draw Captain Klutz, Don Martin's character from Mad Magazine.
Yeah, those big floppy shoes on the ends of the feet.
Yeah, exactly. And I would hold my even though I wasn't painting, I was drawing, but I did hold my mom's mixing palette in one hand and tried to be as artistic as I could, drawing Captain Klutz on the...
Well, I remember when I first met you in high school, you showed me some pretty decent Batman pages. I wasn't sure if they were copies or originals, but, there were Batman stories you were drawing.
I drew Batman comics. I would generally get him in such a terrible fix that I couldn't figure out how to get out. So I would just kind of leave my Batman stories. But I was reading Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams at the time, so there was a lot of blazes and blasts, because that was Denny O'Neil's way of cursing.
Yep.
So yeah, and then I almost got out of it until I met you in high school.
Yeah, I was
and you were so excited about comics. And it turned out we had both been excited about the same people, though. We loved We loved Manhunter, Walt Simonson's Manhunter, and that whole series of super spectaculars, 100-page super spectaculars.
Right, the great super spectaculars that reprinted Golden Age stories. I was also into Harvey Kurtzman, and I was doing my own version of his one page Hey Look stories, and mine were called Phooey. They're Ploy. That was what it was. Yeah, and it was just it was an attempt to imitate him. It was not very good, but so we've been drawing comics since we were very young. And at some point, we decided to get a little more serious about it. Mm-hmm. And we began to, with the rise of the Xerox machine, or the photocopier, we began to realize that you could draw comics and you could make your own little comic books. They wouldn't look like the comic books we bought, with the color covers, and they wouldn't be as big, but they would still work as a comic book. And somehow we plugged into the network of people that were doing that in the 1980s, I guess, right? Wouldn't you say it was the 80s?
No.
This is what's now called the new wave movement, which connects to the new wave movement in music as well. It's a sort of do-it-yourself art.
Didn't Steve Willis hate that new wave title?
He hated. I think so. Yeah, I don't think he cared for it.
Did he prefer Bazango to new wave?
I don't know.
There was a different word that he liked.
I don't remember. I'm not sure what the label is. But
Steve Willis was one of the funniest. He was the funniest and the most inventive of all the guys we came across at that time.
Yeah, reading his stuff just blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it still does.
It still does. Yeah, absolutely. So what we have here in front of us is a big box of mini comics from that era. And
my box is bigger, by the way. I didn't bring it. And then
this is only one of many from the Toomey archives.
And then the first time I met Jeff Zinnick, who was another sort of pivotal figure, legendary among a lot of people who loved this stuff. Jeff at the time was traveling around the country, but this was one of the times he was in Tallahassee. Mm-hmm. This is jumping to the middle of the story, but you and I and Frank Young had just done a zine. And so Jeff, in the true zinester fashion, found me, and I heard him knocking at the door one day. He said, "Did you guys do this? I love it." And so he was living in a storage building he had rented out an area in a.
This is in Tallahassee, Florida.
Yeah,
where the average temperature is probably over 100 degrees.
And inside of a storage facility, it would have been 120 probably. So I have this distinct memory of Jeff proudly showing me his collection of zines. I mean, box after box.
Yeah, I remember
and
you
it was
talking
so
about that.
hot. His sweat was pouring into the boxes as he, and he didn't even notice. He was so happy and proud to share these things with somebody who loved them. So Jeff was the one who had the biggest collection I ever saw.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I actually didn't keep everything I got, but what we used to do was we'd make our own comics, and we'd take them to a copy shop, and it was 25 cents a page or something like that.
And the copies were not very good.
Yeah, the copies weren't very good.
Awful.
And we would copy them off, and then we'd cut them and staple them and assemble them, and then we'd mail them to other guys who were also doing it, and then they would mail them back to us. You know, here's one called Misk, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So we were trading with other guys, or sometimes we'd get a quarter or 50 cents or even a dollar bill in the mail, and we'd send a copy of our comic out. And we distributed, probably a few million copies?
Yeah, a few million.
I think my print runs were probably maybe 25.
At most 50.
So one of the things that we wanted to mention was Factsheet Five.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Factsheet Five was I believe, a monthly publication, and it was this 8.5 by 11 publication printed on newsprint, I believe, with tiny, tiny type, like smaller type than you'd see in a phone book, and just dense, page after page, hardly any illustrations. And what it was just random listings. I think they were organized maybe by category of self-published zines and magazines, like the ones that are in this box. And that was the main distribution hub for trading and buying self-published, do-it-yourself comic books and what are called zines, right? I don't know of any other. I think there was.
It seems like
Clay Garrett's had Comics World, which was a little newsletter, and I'm not sure how that.
And there was a review newspaper in Seattle. There was was Seattle Star. There was something.
No, not the
Seattle
Star,
something.
but you're right. There was something because I got a few reviews. So there were a few smaller publications, but really, Factsheet 5 was it. This is before the internet. This is before you had a way to communicate other than the U.S. mail. So what you do is you'd buy an issue of Factsheet 5, which you had to buy through the mail. So you'd send your money and then you'd wait a long time, weeks, and then you'd get the issue, and then you'd spend a lot of time looking through it and circle. At least I would circle the ones.
Beads of sweat and desire.
Meals going uneaten.
Yeah.
Chores being neglected while you picked out what you wanted, and then you put all your money in envelopes, or you put your comics in envelopes and send it away. And after you get this going, though, for a while you get really interesting mail, and that was
very
fun.
interesting. I mean, like with artfully decorated envelopes.
Yep.
And
let's see if I've got any in here. Well,
all done for you.
Exactly. Just unique.
People doing it just for the sheer love of expression.
Well, these are all the ones I have are kind of.
Steve Willis would often include lots little cards, original drawings that he called Morty comics, and there are just thousands of these things circulating. Still, I mean, to this day, Steve will still draw Morty comics and hide them in places for people to find. We need to do a whole show on that.
Yeah, we got to talk about Morty comics, but I'm just pulling these things out at random. Here's one addressed to me when I lived in Boston. Look how neat that writing is. This is Jason Lutz.
Oh, was that Jason sitting?
This is Jason Lutz. Yeah, he does a comic now called Berlin. Well, let's see what's in here. It's from Penny Dreadful Press. So this was an old press that he did when he attended the Rhode Island School of Design. And what he sent me here is a letter. It says, "Dear Paul," and so he's talking about some
It's just
stuff.
beautifully lettered.
Yeah, beautifully lettered, just like you'd see on the Robert Crumb postcards. And it's a handwritten letter that goes on for many
Is this your first correspondence with?
No, we'd been corresponding for a while.
Now this looks like an early Is that John Porcellino's picture?
Absolutely.
He's a kid. He's a little boy.
Yeah, King Cat Comics. Which issue is that?
47. He's still a kid. It is number 47.
This guy was prolific. Damn.
So he's been going for a while.
So John Porcellino was the guest of honor at last year's Short Run Comics Festival, and that was held in November in Seattle, Washington in 2014. And this guy is a legend. He's like a, he's gone on to become somebody who's known by the current generation of do-it-yourself comic bookers, and he's a model to them. And these were made on his kitchen table. And
I think they're still made on his kitchen table.
I think so. The drawing is very simple, very.
He's a real believer in cartoon simple.
Yeah, cartoon simple, which is a style that Jim has kind of labeled and talks about on a website called cartoonsimple.com. And this is a textbook example. And yet, the stories themselves,
they're nuanced.
They're subtle. They talk about... I always liked these, and I felt they were a cut above a lot of the self-published comics because they reach deeper. They become sort of poetic. And
it is poetry. It's poetry. It's poetry on paper.
It's poetry
and that's
on
a
paper.
big part of the zine culture was an appreciate that way of looking at comics.
I mean, my God, look at this. This is as good as it gets.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's beautiful.
This is really nice stuff. These long horizontal panels reflect the character's melancholy and his solitude and how alone he is and what he's feeling. And then we have this big one down here. So there's a term for that when you have when the shapes are repeated and then one's different. And I can't remember the term, but this is a classic textbook way to do comic book layout. So, even though the drawing looks, kind of like a high school kid's doing it at times, sorry, John, it's actually quite sophisticated. And I think the simplicity of the drawing makes these complicated stories very accessible, that draws you in.
Well, that's connected to the whole idea of the 24-hour comic, too. When you're
right.
doing it fast, you don't stand in your own way. You capture the spontaneity of the original inspiration.
Now, this says it was made in 1994, November 21st,
that's pretty recent.
1994. That's 20 years ago.
That's 94 years ago.
Yeah, that's real recent.
Yeah.
Oh, man, look at that last panel.
Holy smokes, that's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
a cityscape done in John Porcellino style that captures the hugeness and detail, and it's so many interesting things are happening here. It's beautiful.
Yeah, his stuff is great. Always loved it, and I think I purchased this directly from him back in 1994. So let's see. Let's pull. So I don't know. Pull something out and let's talk about it, just at random. This is spontaneous comics and pie.
Well, here's an envelope from Randy Paskey. There's
Paskey.
nothing inside
Now
of it.
there's an interesting fellow. Randy Paskey and Bob Pfeffer.
The high school comics.
High school comics. I think here's one right here.
Yeah.
So these were two guys in high school, and the name of their company was High School Comics. There's the logo right there, HSC.
And they got a lot of really good contributors.
They did.
Hillary Barta, Sergio Aragonés.
A lot of accomplished, big-name people. And they would,
And you couldn't help but respond to their enthusiasm. It was completely understandable why people were so eager to participate with them.
yeah, and you and I and Frank Young contributed to their comics, Misk. So, well, okay. Here's a Misk Halloween special with a cover by Hillary Barta.
Misk was the high school comics guys, right?
Yeah, the High School Comics, and this was their anthology title, which I always thought was a great name for a comic book, Misk.
Look at this lovely Barta drawing.
I know, it's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. And, Misk, they end it with an exclamation point. Like, the Harvey
Misk!
Kurtzman,
Exclamation!
the way Harvey Kurtzman ended most of his stuff, like, mad. What do we have here? We got a story. The first story is by S.A. McLung from 1989. Which leads off with an editorial by Randy and Bob. They sign off Eat Beats, Randy and Bob. And it's published by High School Comics. from Gilbert, Minnesota.
These guys really were publishing powerhouses too. This is a thick zine.
I know. I mean, look at that. There's Casper the Dead Baby. There's a Brad Foster picture. And they did this, which was always nice. In the back, they would publish your little write-up about what you'd done in that issue and give you your the address so people could write you and send you money to get your zine.
Or send you trades. That was another way of getting these things.
So it was also handy because you could see who's in this issue. So we have Hillary Barta, Bob Pfeffer, Brandy Paskey, Scott McLung, Jeff Nicholson, who's still active.
He went, didn't he do Coffee Man?
No, that was Shannon Wheeler.
Okay.
David Lee Ingersoll, Chuck Bunker, Gary Fields.
A lot of guys. This is a way it's changed from those times. I would say there's as many, if not more, women in zine culture now.
Yeah, I know, and I love that about.
Yeah, we're all these wonderful women.
Yeah, this is all guys. This is just all guys. Oh, here's one by J.R. Williams.
Oh, sure.
Oh no,
I didn't realize we
Jimmo.
I didn't realize we had any J.R. Williams ones.
Yeah, this is High School Comics. It's Randy.
Are you
and Bob
kidding?
again.
Is that right?
They published J.R. Williams. Yeah, Milt the Mutation.
Oh, how neat!
So J.R. Williams, for those that don't know, is a very well respected Seattle cartoonist. He had some comics published by Fantagraphics, and he works in a classic cartooning style.
Well, this is
and he's kind of halfway between the cartoonist of the underground cartoonist of the 60s and 70s and Peter Bagg. He's kind of sort of situated in between there stylistically, I'd say. I always liked him because he could tell a good gag.
Yep.
And I always liked his drawings, and he did